Thanks, everyone. Give a talk on how to teach students interactive computing. Not in your field, and surprised that I was invited to deliver a talk. I'm in computer science, associate professor at Western Washington, and I'm editor of ACM Transactional Computing Education. So let's start with a simple question. If you have ever taught a course, do your students really read the textbooks that you give to them? Yeah, probably not. Yeah. Teaching currently a database course, and I open accessed one of the textbooks that I authored. Constantly asked them, do you ever read a chapter that I gave to you? And I did an anonymous survey constantly, basically every day. The answer is constantly no. So yeah, what if we could actually measure how students interact with the course content beyond just asking, did you read the textbook? If you can read how long they read something or how deeply they engage with the learning, that would be wonderful. So that enters the interactive textbook. The promise of interactive textbooks is very clear because you have text and instructions, and beyond that, you also have executable code and visualizations. If you know how to tweak your tools, you can also add these interactive quizzes in those interactive textbooks. You can do basically everything that you want with it, and it's more flexible than just the textbooks. These are all the snapshots from a data structure course that I did years ago. So for textbooks, the only approach we can measure their learning is think about how long they spend on reading. But if we have interactive textbooks, we can do a whole lot more. We can ask ourselves such questions like what interactions actually predict learning, or in what kind of ways they actively manipulate the code and visualizations. And that's why I did the study about 5 years ago on 3 different things. For example, like to what extent they engage with interactive textbooks and how do they interact with it, and their attitude towards using such a tool in their learning process. So we experimented on about 30 computer science students, and we tracked 3 things. We hosted our own Jupyter notebook. The first thing was the reading time. And it's not exactly reading time. We basically tracked how much time students would open a notebook tab in their web browser. Beyond that, we also tracked the response frequency, which means whether they actually execute some code cells, whether they checked some of the quizzes, or they checked the visualization. The last level beyond the response frequency is about changing. Basically, which tracks how the number of times students manipulate the given code snippet. Like if they change something and run it again, it's something that we can keep track of. So we tracked all these 3 things. We try to figure out what actually predict learning, what kind of interaction is the most important. And we also asked a bunch of open-ended questions to understand their attitude towards such a thing. The result is, for me, it's actually surprising because we found that there's a high correlation between changing some code cells as well as executing some code cells. So here you can see the response frequency and the change frequency, they are highly correlated, but the reading time is actually not. For example, they may open a tab in their web browser for a long time, then went to sleep. Yeah, we don't know. To verify this observation, we did a block-wise regression with control and focus. So we try to control as many factors as possible, at least those things we can collect from students, like their gender, race, and whether they did any CS courses before college or during college. And if they did some courses, then what their grades are. These are the control factors. And after controlling these factors, we had 2 blocks of actual focuses. The first is the reading time. The second is the interaction. The interaction is composed of both changing some code cells as well as running some code cells. Because those two factors are highly correlated, we can't treat them as two different factors, so we have only one. And the result basically tells us the reading time doesn't really matter. And the interaction, on the other hand, matters a whole lot in terms of how they would perform by the end of the course. We also coded all the responses to the 3 open-ended questions. I'll be quick, just summarize what we found out. There are 3 takeaways. The first takeaway is they don't just read, they engage differently. If you try to think about if they read something, that doesn't really represent whether they learn or not. It's the manipulation, it's the running the code cells that actually matter a whole lot more. That's the first takeaway. And for example, this is one of the response from the students to those 3 open-ended questions. I love how versatile the Jupyter notebook it is. We can read, try code, and see the results without compiling. The second takeaway is active interaction is the strongest predictor of performance. So reading alone, it only accounts for 10% of the variance of students' final performance, or performance of the whole course. But if we add the interaction behavior, that would be able to explain 42% of their performance. So if you give students something that they can interact with beyond reading, you will have a deeper level of learning. The third takeaway is they really like the idea, but they struggle with the usability. So these are CS students. They have already taken at least 2 CS courses before they take data structure. Yet many of them, they don't know how to use such a tool. And even if we gave step-by-step instruction in the first class, some of them are still kind of clueless. This is a quote from one of the students. I have to run all the cells manually, it's tedious. This is the response they gave to me by the end of the course. Well, they didn't catch that in the first class. They can run every cells automatically. They don't know. So these are all the 3 takeaways. The conclusion is basically if we can do such a thing, we can provide them an interactive tool that would be better for their learning. So yeah, right now I'm doing more beyond just doing the open-ended textbooks. I started open access all the lecture videos that I had in the past on YouTube, because that's the other thing I find students really love. Like it or not, that's how students learn nowadays. You can find me via either my email or this this channel that I created a month ago. Thank you. Yeah.
As someone doing things like this, and sort of more in the YouTube space, actually, YouTube videos plus notebooks, do you think that some of the issues you just mentioned at the end of people not understanding how to do mitigated by watching you run through some of those things in a video? Let's say every video basically watching you do the same thing, they would eventually figure out, oh, he auto runs these cells every time, I can auto run the cells, etc., etc. Do you think that making that part of the regular recurring format can help avoid some of those small nuanced issues?
I believe so. That's at least my observation, because well, if you're thinking about computer science students, they're online on YouTube all the time, especially during evening time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
You had mentioned variation in student performance, and I'm curious what metric you used for student performance. Like, was that exam? Was that final grade? And if you could speak a little bit on the class size and some of like the metadata of the class. Is this is an upper level class? Things
Sure.
like that.
That's a great question. This is an intermediate level course. Students, regardless of which universities they attend in US, they typically take what we call CS1 and CS2 before they take any courses on data structure. This is a data structure course. They are evaluated by a set of things, including exams, quizzes, and labs, and writing assignments. So the performance we use is their total grade by the end of the course. Go ahead.
You mentioned that lastly, the downside is like sometimes you don't see enough like error message, so you don't know how to debug. I personally also bump into a lot of question of that. Like when I do like notebooks that I don't really know how to debug, I have to like pass on onto like maybe Visual Studio, Visual Code, Studio Code or something to debug. Do you have any like idea how to resolve that issue or?
I don't, and I actually don't coding the interactive coding environment myself. It's more like for a teaching purpose. And computer science students don't actually use it either, except for when it comes to analyzing data. But I guess it's definitely very applicable to other fields like biology or physics. Yet I don't have an idea of how to address the limited error messages, because it's a different environment. Thank you. Go ahead.
I had a question. When you showed the graph with the interactions and reading time, there was like blue, green, and red line. So I know brains just like to see patterns, but I was wondering, it sort of almost looks to me like the reading time average is like a delayed version of the interactions, sort of like displaced by a week or so. So do you think there's any chance that the interactions are changing how they plan to future use the textbook?
It's an interesting observation. Sorry, I don't have the answer for you because the only thing we did is a correlation analysis on the data. What I can tell you is the blue and the green lines, they are highly correlated, but not so much with the red line. Thank you. Go ahead.
We found that online evaluations of stuff like this and doing online notebooks are very vulnerable to folks cutting corners using AI and whatnot. It's a bit of a digressive question, but what steps have you taken to try and mitigate those like pedagogical issues with kids using AI?
When it comes to the intermediate level CS courses, we basically don't do anything. We encourage them to use it. We would stop them by any means when they take CS1 and CS2 with us, but at this level, yeah, we just don't care about it anymore. They are adults, we treat them like so.
A related question to that, which is, I saw you're running them sort of in the native Jupyter Notebook environment, but if you run notebooks like that in Colab, it has like autocomplete, which sometimes is basically perfect. And so do you intentionally do it in native Jupyter to kind of avoid that, or you're just really agnostic?
No, the choice of using Jupyter Notebook is we have to track things. So we chose to host a Jupyter Notebook server in the department, so our script could work with it. If we go with Google Colab, we have to develop a Chrome extension, something like that. Otherwise, we won't be able to track students' interaction. Thank you.
Thank you. A mini panel, so if you have a question for Ivan or Christian. More hands, yeah. Go.
So I have a question for Christian. So you used your activity in the context of a genetics course with students that already had genetic content on board. As you were talking, I was thinking about earlier levels, and if the activity might show patterns that then could be explored in the biology. In other words, do the kind of algorithmic understanding of the pattern of inheritance, and then go into how those patterns are generated biologically. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So if I understand what you were saying correctly, I think the one thing I'll mention about what we did was we had never taught them anything about polygenic inheritance. So they had a bit of background. They know what inheritance are. We hope they know what alleles are, things like that. And then we introduced a new biological concept. And they were sort of able to interact with it, think it through, figure it out. But yeah, I guess in terms of an intro class, certainly there's some things that would be more amenable to a computational activity than others. I'm not sure how we would find that off the top of my head.
Well, my follow-up to my tagging of things in that sense, I was wondering always, I mean, I've thought about this just generally in future classes, whether we can improve tagging of things, or at least massive scale tagging things for a large body of students with AI tools as a way of being able to generate these statistics at really high volume.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know at least one group in Oslo, and they're working on using LLMs to really do wide-scale coding of. They've done it on physics papers in the Israeli PER journal, but they also want to apply it to things like survey data and interview data to see how well they can do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think my current limitation would even be in student population size. We only have 24 groups of 2.
Yeah.
It's easy enough to do by hand. I wasn't going to fiddle around trying to do this in large scale. But if you have huge classes where a number of people doing it.
Yeah.
The other option is just having a team of undergrads. The traditional way to do that.